So we're here on Daf Yud Beis in Masechet Berachos, and we're starting with Pshita. So the Gemara mentions one case which there's no suffix about. Hecha de kanokit kasa de chamra biyade. So he's holding wine in his hand because of the shichrahu, but mistakenly he thinks it's beer. Now, the bracha for yayin is bar priagafen. The bracha for shechar is shahakol bidvaro. So in his mind, he doesn't realize that he's holding on to wine. So he begins his bracha shahakol bidvaro adaita de shikra because he thinks he's got beer. And then when he gets to the chasima, he realizes that he's got wine and he's not holding on to beer. So siyam b'dechamra, he catches himself. So the case is the following. He says, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, and he thinks he's going to complete it with shahakol niyah bidvaro. He's under the misimpression he's holding on to beer. And then before he gets to shahakol niyah bidvaro, he realizes that he's got wine in his hand and he completes his bracha with bar priagafen. So it's only the chasima, the end of the bracha, is the point at which he realizes that he's not going to be making a shakol niyah bidvaro. And the Gemara says in this case, pshita di yotza. The bracha is a bracha kshera. It's valid. Why? De'inami im amar shahakol niyah bidvaro yotza. Even if he would have completed the bracha, as he mistakenly thought he should have with shahakol niyah bidvaro, he would still be yotze his chiyuv bracha vis-a-vis yayin. Now we have a Mishnah. Al kulam im amar shakol niyah bidvaro yotza. So shakol niyah bidvaro is a bracha that encompasses everything. So all this is pshita, and this is sort of like an introduction, a background to the suffix that's coming now in the presentation of the Gemara. And the Gemara says the following: Ella, what's my suffix? And now we're going to have a case where, in his mind, he's going to be reciting a bar priagafen of what he thinks is yayin, but in fact it's shahakol. And a bar priagafen is not valid for a shahakol. Just he catches himself on time before the end of the bracha. Hecha de kanokid kasa de shikra biyada. So he's not aware of the fact that he's holding on to beer. Because Savar the Chamra, he's under the misimpression that he's holding on to wine. So he begins his bracha, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, and he's about to conclude with Bari Priagafen, which is not a good bracha here for beer. But the shikra, he catches himself, and after he says Hamelech melech haolam, he finishes the bracha by saying Shakol niyah bidvaro. So when you think about it and analyze this case, you realize that as far as the Shemu Malchus, which are the basic parts of the bracha, he had in mind Bar Priagafen, which is not a valid bracha. He caught himself when he got to the Chasimas HaBracha, realizing that he has beer in his hand, and he completed his bracha with Shakol niyah bidvaro mai. Basar ikar bracha azlinan or basar chasima azlinan. What determines the bracha? Is it the beginning of the bracha or the end of the bracha? The beginning of the bracha was al das yayin. He had in mind to make bar priagafen. That's not a valid bracha in this case. But he caught himself before the chasima, and he ended with shakol niyah bidvaro. So the Gemara is vacillating now back and forth. What's the determining moment, the critical moment of the bracha? Is it the beginning of the bracha or the end of the bracha? Is it the Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, or is it the end of the bracha, which is, in this case, Shakol Nia Bidvaro, when he realizes before he completes the bracha that he's holding on to Sheikha. Now, the Gemara is going to bring two basic braisos or sugyos, one in order to try to determine what the halacha should be in this case. One is going to be a discussion about Birchas Kriyat Shema, and the other is going to be a discussion about Bracha Lachrel, meaning the Birchas HaMazon. Now, I want to make a decision here in terms of where we should proceed, because there are two understandings, maybe there's more than two, I only know of two, of the sugya that we're learning. There's Rashi and the Ramban. What we've done until now is basically Rashi. The Ramban has an entirely different approach, and I'm not sure, it could be, I want to determine this, that the Ramban has a different girsa, he has a different text in the Gemara. And I'm not sure which is the simpler way of learning the Gemara, whether it's Rashi or it's the Ramban. I'll tell you why I'm inclined to try to investigate with you the Ramban here, because according to Rashi, the bracha that he recited was a perfectly valid bracha, meaning if you listen to the words of his bracha from beginning to end, this is exactly the bracha that he was meant to recite. So, for example, in the first case, he mistakenly thought that he's holding on to beer, so his mind was set on making a shahakol bidvaro, and at the end, he concluded the bracha after realizing that it's yayin that he's holding on to, he made a bar priya gofen. And in the second case, where he's holding on to what he thinks is wine, but at the end of the bracha, he realizes that it's shechar, and he completes his bracha with shakol nia bidvaro. The bracha from beginning to end is a perfectly good bracha. So why is the Gemara vacillating about whether or not he has a bracha kshera? So this whole concept of Rashi, of basar ikar brachas linan, that we might disqualify the bracha because we go back to the beginning of his bracha, it's a very difficult concept. And the Rav Zichron Livracha, I wasn't in the shiurim when he taught brachos, but from the Rishima Shiurim, the Rav worked very hard to try to understand this sugya according to Rashi. So I'm going to do the following, and we'll see if it works. Assuming that we're not time constrained and we're doing okay with the clock, I'm going to try to present the Ramban sheet. First, what we call in Yiddish Eisavedic, meaning outside, and then maybe we'll read the Ramban inside. The Ramban's sugya, which, as I said, is very different, this very same sugya, but it's a different sugya than Rashi's sugya, is a case where he messed up in the chasima as well. So that means the nusach habracha, as he recited it, was problematic. So, for example, in the Ramban's frame of reference, in the first case, where he has, he has I'm sorry, the first case was what? That he has wine in his hand, and he's going to make the bracha on wine, but then he finds out that that he has sheikhar in his hand. The Ramban says that he went ahead and he said Bor Priya Gofet, thinking that he had wine in his hand. And then realizing after he completed his bracha that lo and behold, he has sheikhar in his hand, he added shakol nia bidvaro. So it means at the end of the day, his bracha was Bori Priya Gofen Shahakol nia bidvaro, which I find that's a fascinating sugya, because part of the bracha is incorrect. Let's call it that way. We'll call it a kilkul of the bracha, or a psul of the bracha, because he went ahead thinking that he had wine, and he said after the beginning of the bracha, he said Borei Pri Hagofen, and then he catches himself and he adds Shahakol Nia Bidvaro. That's the sugya according to the Ramban. And the Gemara says pshita in this case that he was Yotzei, and the reason for that apparently is because he caught himself on time to correct himself. And the Bar Pri Hagafa that he recited is Kimanda Lesadom. It's as if it wasn't there. So when he's trying to fix up his mistake, he can do so. Again, within a certain time limit, which the Ramban calls Toch Kidei Dibur. So we'll see what the Ramban means by that. Where was the Gemara's Safek? The Gemara's Safek was in the opposite direction, where instead of adding something at the end of his bracha to fix up, he adds something that messes up the bracha. And what's the case? The case is that he started the bracha in the right way. For example, he's holding on to a kos of sheikhar, of beer, and he makes the bracha. Shahakol nia bidvaro. And then he makes a mistake. And he says, wait a minute, I don't know if I have beer here. Maybe I have wine here. And he adds Bar Pri Hagafen. And in this case, the Gemara vacillates because, says the Ramban, here, his addition, if we incorporate into his bracha, is makalkel the bracha. In other words, it's pshita that a person could fix up a mistake that he made, and thinking that it was wine, he mistakenly finished his bracha with Bar Pri Hagafen, and now, within a certain time period, as we said, Tokadei Dibur, he can add and fix it up with Shakol Nia Bidvaro, realizing that he has beer. But in the case where his addition doesn't fix up something in the bracha, but rather ruins the bracha, because, again, he was doing fine. He thought he had sheikhar, and in fact, he does have sheikhar. He finishes his bracha bar shakol nia bidvaro, chad v'chalak, everything is wonderful, but then he makes a mistake, and thinking that he has wine, he wants to correct himself, but instead of correcting himself, he messed up and added Bar Pri Hagafen. So his chasima was shahakol nia bidvaro Bar Pri Hagafen. This is what we call in English, quit while you're ahead, or in Hebrew we call it kol hamosif goreah. He added something to his bracha, and the Gemara vacillates as to whether or not the addition to the bracha, insofar as it now becomes part and parcel of the bracha, will be makalkel the bracha. So it's pshita that he could add to the bracha and fix up the bracha, but maybe in the opposite direction, where his addition was a kilkul bracha, then we don't relate to it. He said the shakol b'dvaro. At that split second, he fulfilled his chiyuv bracha. What he adds later is irrelevant. Now, the problem here in the Ramban, everybody has a problem. Rashi, we said, has a problem because the nusach habracha was perfect. He recited the bracha exactly as he should. And therefore, Rashi has to introduce the fact that, well, something in his mind was problematic because he was under the wrong impression. For example, he thought that he'd have to make a bar priya gofen. He catches himself at the very end, the tail end of the bracha, realizing that as sheikh, and he makes a shakol b'dvaro. But again, according to Rashi, the problem is, what's the issue over here? He had a perfectly excellent bracha in the nusach habracha. The Ramban also, I think, is going to have a problem here. And that is, why should this halach of tochadei dibur work in one direction and not in another direction? Meaning, let's be consistent. If you're telling me that if he accidentally made a bar priya gofen and then he fixed himself up with a shakol b'dvaro, since it was tochadei dibur, we're going to allow him to fix up his bracha, clean up the mess, so to speak, of the bar priya gofen by adding shakol b'dvaro. We should be consistent in the opposite direction, and that is that if he added a bar priya gofen after the completion of his bracha shakol b'dvaro, meaning he had sheikha, but all of a sudden, after he finishes the bracha, he thinks mistakenly that he has to make a bar priya gofen, so he made a bar priya gofen. Well, if there's halacha tokadei dibur, and that halacha allows you to shift around the bracha, then it should apply in both directions, whether it's to be machshir the bracha or to be posel the bracha. Then that's the problem that we have in the Ramban. Now, let's go back to the Gemara itself. As I said before, the Gemara is going to bring a toshma from Birchas Kriyat Shema, and the Gemara is going to reject that toshma until it brings a toshma from Bracha Achrona, from Birchas Hamazon. So let's see, toshma. So if you're looking at the page that I sent you in the email, which I hope you got, Ruvain, you have to make your email address a little bit simpler for people like me to remember that it starts with the THE. Anyway, so Tashma, Shachris. Okay, now in the morning, the bracha that precedes Kriyat Shema, the first bracha lefanea, starts with Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam. But you know what? I'm just going to take out a siddur just to make sure I don't make any mistakes here. Yotzer or uborei choshech oseh shalom uvreyes hakol. So the Brisa now addresses in the Reisha the case where he opens up the bracha with Yotzer or, and his intention is to recite Yotzer or uvorei choshech, so everything is good. But v'siyim b'marav harovim, his chasima was appropriate for Kriyat Shema Shel Arvis. And in such a case, lo yotza. And we can appreciate this statement because his nusach habracha is inappropriate. The ending of his bracha of Baruch Atah Hashem Ma'arev Harovim is not appropriate. It's good for Ma'ariv, but not for Shachris. Okay, then, so that's fine. The same principle applies in the opposite case. Now, it's nighttime. I don't know, for some reason he doesn't point that out. So Posach b'marav harovim. So he says, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech olam, asher b'dvaro mariv harovim, but v'tziem b'yotzer or. In other words, and then he went on to recite the bracha of Shachris, which is Yotzer Or. Is Yotzer. No, just one second. I made a mistake here. Posach, just one second. Posach b'Yotzer Or. So now it's Posach b'marav harovim. But his siyum habracha, this is the principle I call holech achar achisum, where the Gemara is quoting this brisa to prove that everything depends upon, the finale, the end of the bracha. So here, the end of the bracha was fine, because even though he mistakenly started with marav harovim, and it's Shachris now, and I'm going to add the word Shachris here, he ended the bracha with Yotzer Or. So even though when he started the bracha, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech olam, he had Asher b'dvaro mariv haravim in mind, but nevertheless he completed his bracha properly with Yotzer Or. And therefore Yotzer. So what's the difference between the Reisha of the Reisha and the Seif of the Reisha? Because we're up to Ma'ariv now, but first we're dealing with two cases of Shachris. In the first case of Shachris, he's Lo Yotzer because he completed his bracha with Ma'ariv Haravim. In the second case, he completed his bracha properly with Yotzer Or. And everything goes Basa the Chisum, the end of the bracha. Now we have a mirror image in Arvis. Again, two cases. Arvis Posach b'marav harovim, v'siyem b'yotzer or lo yotzer. So he started with the proper nusach, and his intention was to say Asher b'dvar marav harovim, but after he said Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech olam, he added yotzer or, which is not appropriate for nighttime. You don't thank Hashem for light in the night, is lo yotzer. However, in the opposite scenario, Posach b'yotzer or, in other words, his mistaken intention was to be mavarch as if it was Shachris on yotzer or, v'siyem b'marav harovim, but he did complete the bracha properly, yotzer. And now the brisa formulates the principle here that will determine all four scenarios, and that's klol shel davar hakol holech achar achitum. Everything depends upon the way he finishes the bracha. Now let's take a break and see how this, by analogy, is going to answer our question. The original suffix of the Gemara is a case where his intention was thinking that he's holding on to wine to make a bar priya gofen. I'm going to into Rashi now, right? And at the end, when he realizes that he's holding on to a cup of wine, he finishes the bracha with sha'akol ni'amidvara. And that's the proper chasima for the bracha. And therefore, we could prove from the brisa of Birchas Kriyat Shema that hakol holech achar hachasima. And here the chasima was a valid chasima. And therefore, he's yotzei. He says, Me'adin hasheni shala reisha v'aseifa. Right, the reisha has two cases, the seifa has two cases. And in the second case, in each of the reisha, the seifa, he was yotze the bracha, even though his original intention was to mess up the bracha, but everything goes by the chasima. And therefore, yesh lomer linyan birchas shechar, afshek shehizkir shema malchus, what was his intention when he started the bracha? And he said God's name and malchus. It was to make a bar priya gofen, but he caught himself before the chasima and he completed it, realizing as shechar, and he said shakol nivdvaro, he was yotze because hakol holech achar achitu. And now the Gemara is going to reject. Shiny chosam de kobaruch yotzer hamaoros. So the Gemara is pointing out here that Birchas Kriyat Shema is fundamentally different than Birchas Hanenim. Birchas Kriyat Shema is a bracha that's made up of two parts. You've got the opening, and then you have a chasima, and in the chasima you say Baruch Atah Hashem. So therefore, since in the chasima he mentions Baruch Atah Hashem, that is a valid bracha. Hence the principle of Hakol Holech Achar Achisam. But in the case of Birchas Hanenim, there's no chasima with a Baruch Atah Hashem. You have only one flowing continuous bracha, one bracha ktsara, and therefore it could very well be that Hakol Holech Basar Ikar bracha, or the Psichas bracha. So that in the case of Kriyat Shema, you don't have a proof because I don't care so much about the psicha, or what we say, the ikar bracha. What I care about is there a bracha at the chasima? And there is a bracha at the chasima. Baruch atah Hashem yotzer hamoros. So that chasima itself contains within it the kiyum chovasa, the ability for him to be yotzi de chovasa. He says, Klomar, li'olam bracha sheb'sichos v'achsheves mekukeles einamo ilu klum. Afilu machasima kahogim. Umasha shaninu bebraisa sheyotza mishum shechosam bo baruch atah Hashem yotzer ha'ma'oros. Umachmas chasimas habracha amru sheyotza yedei chovasa. Kevan shelechasima atzma yesh toras bracha. I don't know, he says that Kimazkir Bos Mila Baruch, he means Baruch Atah Hashem. Mashen came in Bircha Shakal She'ena B'Sein B'Siyuma Tevas Baruch. Right, there's no Baruch Atah Hashem at the end with Chasima, is we need the Psicha, and it's very possible that if he had the wrong Machshav at the time of the Psicha, that's Mekalka Lebrach. Shechoshev Al Das Lomar Bori Priyagov. He thought he had wine. And when he started the bracha and he said Baruch Atah Hashem, etc., he had in mind Bar Priyagov. So this is what we have here. Okay, now I'm going to recommend we take a little bit of a break from Rashi and let's see if we can look at the Ramban. So as we said before, according to the Ramban, we're talking about adding to the bracha and changing the nusach of the chasimas habracha, which could work in one of two ways. Either he fixes up what he messed up, or he messes up what he did correctly. So the Ramban writes the following. V'kachi hatza'a shel shmua. This is the way we should present this sugya. Pshita, heicha did nakat kasa dechamra biyodei. He's holding on to a cup of wine, kasava de shikrahu. He thinks that it's sheikhar. Ubarich, and he recited the bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem, shahakol nia bidvaro, bore priya gofen. In other words, since he mistakenly thought it was sheikhar, he said shahakol nia bidvaro. But then he caught himself, looked at the kos, I guess, and he added bar priya gofen. Lifi shehirgish miyad shel koshel yayinhu. Yatsa. The Ramban says he fulfills his mitzvah. Why? Bein de nasal basar psicho, bein basar chasima. He says it matters not whether we look at the psicha. So again, what's the case? He's holding on to wine. So right? So what does he do? He fixes his mistake when he realizes that he's drinking wine. And he adds the shakal nia bidvaro bori priya gofen. So what does he mean? Bein de nasal basar psicha, bein de nasal basar chasima. I guess he's saying because the chasima, when he realized he's got wine and he added bar priya gofen, that's a valid chasima. But why is the psicha valid? Because shakal nia bidvaro works even for wine. Let's see if I'm right. Shafilu siyem b'deshikra. Even if he didn't correct himself. Let's say he would have ended with shahakal nia bidvaros, thinking mistakenly he's got beer. He would be yotzei his chiyuv bracha on wine, because as we said before, shahakal nia bidvaro is this overarching, all-inclusive bracha that works for everything. Inami. So again, in the first case, he was holding on to wine. And when he finally realizes it, he adds bar priya gofen. Now we have another case. Noket ki kasa de shikra b'yoda. He's holding on to sheikhar. So pasach ubarach, bari pri hagofen. In other words, he thinks mistakenly that he's holding on to wine. So immediately when he realizes that he's holding on to sheikhar, he adds shahakol nia bidvaro. Is yatsa. Shreichazer bo miyad toch kidei dibu. In other words, after reciting his bar priya gofen, he was chazer bo. Meaning he retracted his statement of bar priya gofen, realizing that he's holding on to beer, v'siyem berchaso karoi. Umipnei shahosiv ba lo pasa. And since he added, just 1 second, he added bar priya gofen, mistakenly, lo pasa. Ella sha'amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu bara zeh v'zeh. So the Rabban says something interesting. It's a bracha. He's thanking Hashem for both wine and sheikhar. Even though he's only drinking sheikhar, but it doesn't matter. We can validate the bar priya gofen as a thanks to Hashem for creating wine. Glatt Nevelta, right? He's not drinking wine, but he's thanking Hashem for wine. So where is the suffix? Ella pasach hakasa de shikra b'de shikra. So he has a cup of beer, and he makes the bracha on beer. Vita. And now he makes a mistake. And he looks down at the kos, I guess it's dark or whatever it is, and he thinks, no, this is wine. Quit while you're ahead. And then he says, Bor Priya Gofen. My Bosor Ikar Brochas Linon. Right? The Ikar Brocha was Shakal Lia Bidvaro. And that's exactly what he had to make. Biyotza. Ukvar Hishlim Birchaso Kalach. His bracha registers. Boom. Bechazor betos. Now he makes a mistake thinking it's wine, so he adds bar priya gofen. Shechazar v'siyem shalo karoi. Lo havi chazor leposla. So again, in the first case, he had a chazara, and through that chazara, he's machshir the bracha. In other words, realizing that it's wine that he has and not shechar, he immediately shifted to bar pri hagafen, and that he could do. Why? Sharei chazer bo miyad tokadei dibur v'siyam berchaso karoi. So even though he said bar priya gofen, which was not karoi, okay, he's thanking Hashem for creating wine, and then catching his error, he adds shakal nibidvaro, and it was tokadei dibur. So therefore, the Ramban says that he can be messiah his bracha karoi through his chazar tokadei dibur by adding shakal nibidvaro. But in the opposite direction, when after he makes the bracha of shakal nibidvaro properly, he then thinks mistakenly he's got wine, and he adds bar priya gofen. Lo avi chazor leposla. And again, it's all tokadei dibur. And as I said before, this Ramban is a bit problematic because you're only using tokadei dibur in one direction and not in the other. You're willing to say that tokadei dibur, he could correct himself when he realizes he's got beer, and after the bar priya gofen, he could add shakal nibidvaro and be messiah his bracha ke'ilchasa. But you're not willing to incorporate the mistaken bar priya gofen that he adds to the shakal nibidvaro tokadei dibur when he all of a sudden came to the mistaken conclusion that he has wine. And the only clue that the Ramban gives us here is kfar hishlim birchaso k'halacha. As soon as he recited shakal nibidvaro, it's beer that he has. He fulfills his bracha, and the bracha is kilchasa. The fact that mistakenly he thinks he has wine and then he adds bar priya gofen, that's irrelevant. His bracha is already registered, if I can use that term. O Dilma, afilu bezu basar chasimas linon v'lo yotza. So it works in the opposite direction according to this side in the Gemara, and he has now a chazara which is makalkel, and that creates a chasima of bar priya gofen on sheikha. So therefore, he wasn't yotza. Toshma. Oh, now we'll see what did the Gemara, according to the Ramban's pshat, find in the case of Birchas Hashachar, Birchas Kriyat. Diamrinon, Shachris Posach Biyotzer Or. Okay, so far so good. But v'siyim b'marav harovin lo yotza pirish shebirech habracha kula b'yotzer or. So if I understand correctly, what the Ramban means by birech Habracha kula biyotzer or means he completed the bracha with Baruch Atah Hashem Yotzer HaMa'oros. V'chasam, and then he completes his bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Marav HaRovin. The Havile Nokat Kasa de Shikra, Pasach b'de Shikra, V'siyim b'de Chamra. Maybe at this point the Ramban is learning that he messed up on the Chasima, cross Pashat, straight away. And therefore lo yotze. Avol Pasach b'marav harovin, ubirech kula b'shal arvis, v'chasam bo Baruch Atah Hashem Yotzer HaMa'oros yotze. The Havile Pasach b'de Chamra, v'siyim b'de Shikra. Right, because the Bar Priyag, the Shakal Nibidvaro covers him even for Chamra. Tani Mias Reisha, Lo Yotza. Right, in the Reisha where he started with Yotzer Or, but he ends the Chasi with Marav HaRovim, Lo Yotza, Shmamino Basar Chasima Aslina. Ukirik Tani, Hakol Holech Achar Achisa. Uparik Hasam Ika Bracha B'Chasima, Klomar Li Olam Emel Echad Pasach B'Shikra, Ad Shikra, Afagav to Siyim b'dechamra yotza. Even though he makes a mistake and he wants to make a bracha on yayin with a bar pri hagafen, nevertheless he's yotza l'fi shekvar nishla brachas legamri. Umay the other basa hochi, and even though he adds bar pri hagafen, mili dichdininu, they're worthless, empty words. The afagav de toiba, less lonba. We don't pay any attention to the bori priyagov. Aval bebraisa kevet sheyesh chasima adayin mitorf habrachasu. So he still has the basic form of the bracha or the aspect of the bracha. Because Shina lo yotza, unless he changes the nusach habracha. Okay. So that's what we have. That's what we have so far. So I'm going to put the Ramban now on the side. And let's go back to the Gemara. Where's my printout? Just 1 second. Okay. So the Gemara says, "Ha nichal Rav." That works out fine according to the Rav sheet, to the Yom Kol Bracha Shem Ba Hazkaras Hashem in a bracha. So in other words, according to Rav, the bracha is the Hazkaras Hashem. That's the Ikar bracha. Shapir. Then we understand it very well, and why we rejected the proof from the Brisa, because the Chasim of Yotzer HaMa'oros is a valid bracha unto itself. El Rabbi Yochanan the Omer Kol Bracha Shein Ba Malchus Eino Bracha. It's not enough to just say Hashem's name. You have to add Melech Olam. Ma'ikol Meimar. In the Chasim of Yotzei Ma'oros, there's no mention of Malchus, of Melech Olam. It's just Bracha to Hashem. We mention the Shem, but not Malchus. So therefore, that doesn't have Torah's Bracha. So you can't just wipe away this proof, this analogy, and this raya from the Brisa that Akol Holech Chisum, because the Chisum itself is a bracha. It's not a bracha according to Rabbi Yochanan. So therefore, im chasam karoi yotzi de chovaso, his machshava was, I think it says here, b'psichas habracha, was shalo kahogen. Right? So we go back to our proof and we say, once again, we have a proof that hakol holech basar hachasim. So now the Gemara rejects the Brisa, the proof from the Brisa in a different way. Ella, Havan, the Omar Rabba Bar Ula. That it's interesting, in the Bracha of Shacharis, we say Yotzer Oru Borei Choshech. And in the Bracha of Arvis, we say Golil Or Bnei Choshech V'Chosh Or. So Rabba Bar Ula, who is the basis for this, so our shevach to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is to thank God for day and night, whether it's by day you add night or by night you add day. And therefore, Kika Omar, Bracho Malchus, when he opened up by saying, Bruchat Hashem Elokeinu Melech Olam, and in Shachris he had in mind to continue the bracha with Marav Haravim, or the other way around in Arvis, he was going to say Yotzer Or, is Mikara Travayu Kama. He has Kavana for both Midas Hayom and Midas Laila. So the bracha Marav Haravim also includes mention of Midas Hayom, and that's called Golel Or. And the bracha of Yotzer Or in the morning also mentions Midas Halayla when it says Uborei Choshech. So therefore, his opening of the bracha is Eina Mekul Keles, and therefore Yotzaba. Okay, so now we're up to the next Tashma. Tashma Misefa, from the end of the Bryce. No. We're still in the same Bryce, but now we're going to the end of the Bryce. So the Gemara says, whenever you have a klal at the end of a brisa, it's coming to include something. Shouldn't we assume that it's coming to include a case where he wanted to make a bar priyah gafen, thinking as wine when it was really sheikhar? He reminds himself that it was sheikhar, and then he concludes the bracha with shakol niya b'dvaro, and he's yotze. Why? Because hakol holech basar achasima. And the Gemara says, lo, lasuye nama v'tamre. So now we're shifting our focus to what's called the bracha achrona, the bracha lachreha. So you have bread and you have dates. And he doesn't remember exactly what he ate. Hechi domi, what's the case? If he tries to remember and he thinks that, I must have eaten dates, but in truth he ate a pas. Upasach adaite de tamri, thinking that he had eaten dates, he started making what we call the bracha me'ein shalosh, and that is ala eitz al priya eitz. But siyem b'nahama, realizing, snapping out of it that he ate bread, he concludes his bracha with hazon es olam kulo, meaning the full-fledged birkas hamazon. Is then hainu ba'ayan. Then we have our issue over here. That if he thinks he has wine and he finishes with shal kol niya b'dvaro, yotza, right? He thought that he had eaten tamarim, and he finishes realizing that he ate bread with hazanas olam kulo, and he was yotza. So Gemara says no. There's no proof. Lo tzricha, that's not what the Bryce has in mind when it says hakol zakla. But rather, kigon the achal tamri, just the opposite. Instead of, in truth, he ate bread, in truth, he ate dates. And the bracha after dates, I'll eat vel priyates, because he thinks mistakenly, I ate bread. So he starts birkas hamazon, which lechor is not the appropriate bracha for tamri, but he thinks he ate bread. Uposach b'nat nama. So he starts making the bracha of Baruch Atah Hashem Hazon, and then after Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Olam, and after he got to Melech Olam, snaps out of it, realizes that he ate tamarim, yatsa. The afilu siyim b'nahama. Now, why is he yotze? After all, he had in mind to bench when in fact he ate tamarim. So the Gemara answers, the afilu siyim b'nahama yotza. My timer did tamri nami mezin zayin. So if you mistakenly made a bracha achrona of birkas hamazon, the full-fledged birkas hamazon, on tamarim, then you are yotze. Okay, that's the end of the sugya. So I have in front of me the Rishimas Shiurim. What I could do, well, let me just, maybe I'll make a decision based on what you tell me. Jeff, you usually drop out now, right? But what about Reuven and John? Are you, Reuven and John, staying for the second part? If you can give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Yeah, fine.
All right. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to take a break, and I'm going to. The only thing is that Reuven, you don't have WhatsApp, do you? So how do I get you this text? I would have to do a.
I do, yes.
What?
Yeah, I have.
You have WhatsApp?
I have your WhatsApp. Yes.
Oh, so for some reason, well, I don't know why I don't find your WhatsApp. All right, wait, first let me just shut this down for a second.